Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Our guest today is Don Weber, a former Illinois judge and prosecutor. He is currently a candidate in the Republican primary for Illinois State Representative in the new 108th District. Mr. Weber has a long career as an attorney and public servant. He's been a state's attorney in both Madison and Ford counties. He's been a senior trial attorney in the Madison County State's Attorney's Office, and he's been a third Judicial Circuit judge. He's a patent attorney registered to practice before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Mr. Weber has successfully obtained over 300 United States patents, trademarks, and copyrights. He is here today to discuss his position on taxes, illegal drugs, mass tort reform, and concealed carry laws. Don Weber, welcome to Conversation.
Lee, thank you. It's nice being here.
Just so that people know, actually, I've known you for quite a number of years. It's good to see you again. It's been a number of years since we've actually been together.
You too, Lee. I knew you before you were a successful TV anchor man.
Yes. And now look at me.
Yeah.
So you want to be a state rep?
Well,
the question, just go ahead and say, why?
Yeah.
Why would you want to get yourself beaten up like that?
Well, the answer is yes, I do want to be a state representative. And actually, I've been in the executive branch, I've been in the judicial branch, and both of those areas left something to be desired because you're really restrained by what the state statutes say. At least most judges are. I was as a judge. Some local judges aren't particularly restrained by that. But for many years...
Pause there for a second. What do you mean by that? That's a very interesting discussion. What do you mean by certain judges don't find themselves restrained by the laws that are on the books in Illinois?
Well, let me just give you an example about the asbestos court docket that we have in Madison County. It's a mass tort docket. It makes millions and hundreds of millions of dollars for local lawyers who turn around and put the money into judges' campaigns, who give the local lawyers favors. Madison County has a bunch of local rules that the judges pass that you have to abide by. And
now, every court has local rules, right?
Well, every court does, but every court doesn't modify the state statutes at the request of the plaintiff's lawyers to rig the system so that defendants basically can't get a fair trial. And that's what our local rules have done. So I've actually proposed some state legislation to amend the statutes to make it very clear that, for instance, a defendant in an asbestos case should be entitled to show that he wasn't primarily responsible for the injury. Now, don't get me wrong about mesothelioma. It's a very bad disease. I've had a couple people that died of it. I did. I have a friend too who died. And it's just it's a terrible way to die. It's basically a death sentence. One of the problems is that all the companies who basically caused this are bankrupt. And they were bankrupt 20 years ago, and you can't sue them. So now the local lawyers get together and they sue people who have practically nothing to do with mesothelioma or causing it, but they rig the rules so these defendants can't defend themselves in court. And they do it by a series of intricate local rules. They're very complicated. For example, deferring all third-party practice. Now, I know that's, to most of your viewers, that's sort of just, I might as well go up and smoke on that one. But what that means as a practical matter is that local rule prohibits a defendant from defending himself properly in front of a jury. I happen to trust juries. I've been in front of 100 juries. I trust their decisions. Most of the time they were finding in my favor, but not always. When they weren't, I still trusted their verdict. But we have to amend the state statutes so that the local judges are just simply not able to fix the system.
So that's why you're wanting to be a state representative, so that you can introduce a bill like that and see it through the process?
Well, actually, what motivated me to run for state representative was the out-of-control spending in Illinois. That's the problem. And I told a crowd of people the other night that my three top priorities as a legislator would be, number one, we have to control spending. Secondly, I think that we just have to control spending. But just as importantly, thirdly, I think we have to control spending. Those have to be your top three priorities. If those are your priorities and you actually can cut spending, then everything else probably falls in line. We can do away with this onerous tax increase, particularly on corporations. We don't have to vote for big bailouts of corporations like one of my opponents has already done. We can cut taxes, but we have to get spending under control. Now, maybe that means that some good projects that would be good if we had the money, we just can't spend the money on. And I think that's the difference probably between me and the other candidates in my particular race. A good example was the third interchange at Highland. It is just a perfect example. Highland is a town of about 10,000 people. There's an interstate that runs right by it. There are two exits that lead into Highland. It's a nice little town. It's pretty easy to get to with the two exits. It's been proposed that a whole lot, millions of dollars, be spent on a third exit for Highland. Now, I haven't looked at, is this really a good idea? Is this really not a good idea? My analysis did not get that far. Even though my two opponents were for it, my analysis was, we can't afford this. This might be a good project, but we can't afford it. Another thing we can't afford is bike paths. We have the Taj Mahal of bike paths in Madison County because our state senator, Evelyn Bowles, traded her vote for her pet project, bike paths. We got the bike paths. Chicago got the Northeast Tollway. My opponent is advocating bike paths. He went to a meeting in St. Jacob and said, we need more bike paths. Bike paths might be nice. We can't afford that. We have to cut spending. And you have to cut spending in your own district, because if you vote for bike paths in your district, then you have to vote for a lake project or who knows what in someone else's district. So I believe you have to bring some of the taxpayer money back home on projects that we have to have: health, safety, police, things like that. But state spending is totally out of control. The pension plan is totally out of control. We have to get control of that. And if we don't, I don't know what will happen, but I want to go to Springfield to change that.
Couple of things. First, how many people would you figure are going to vote in your race in the general election, approximately?
Well, let me just explain that district to you a little bit. There's no Democrat running in this. So the primary election is probably
the
election, the one on March 20th.
Well, that's interesting. Why is there normally at least a token Democrat is running in a heavily Republican district?
Well, it's just a heavily Republican district.
So they're not even running anybody.
Right. No one is running, and almost certainly the Republican primary voters are going to decide who they send to Springfield.
Okay. Well, the point of my question was, of all these thousands or tens of thousands of people who are going to be voting in the race that you're running in, how many of them are really willing to give up bike paths or entry ramps and exit ramps to Highland, thinking that, hey, I want mine? That's, I believe, is the problem. And oftentimes I hear the news media, and now I'm on my soapbox, I hear the news media constantly talking about deficiencies in the political class. But I believe that much of the problem actually stems from the public. You folks right there, yes, you. The ones who keep asking politicians to spend money and more money than they have because you need it and you want it. And so oftentimes people who say don't spend don't get voted for because those folks over there want it.
Lee, I think that's a good observation. And the conventional wisdom is you bring home the bacon and you vote for the other guy's bacon and you get elected. I'm going to test that conventional wisdom in this election. I'm not running for this office as state representative to make it a career. I've already had a successful career as a prosecutor and as a judge. I'm running to make a difference in Springfield. Really, my main opponent in this race is the pick of the political insiders. He's got the endorsements, I've got the ideas. He's handing out the pork, I'm saying I'm not going to hand out the pork. The voters are going to be able to choose. There's a very clear-cut choice that they're going to have. He says that he'll make the tough decisions, but so far his tough decisions have been for water projects and road projects and bike paths. To me, these are easy decisions for me to make. I'm simply going to vote no on everything that doesn't relate to the health or public safety of the people in this district. And if that means that Highland's going to have to wait a few years until we have our fiscal house in order, or if it means that St. Jacob is going to get their bike paths, I'm betting that I'm right. I'm betting that the voters have had it. They've had it with maybe $125 billion in eventual pension underfunding. Maybe they're prepared now to make their cuts, to vote for someone who's going to go to Springfield and not fit in. I'm not going to fit in Springfield. That's why the politicians don't want me up there, because I'm going to vote no on these projects. I'm going to vote no on some of my projects that I think we can do without for now, and some of everyone else's projects that I think we can do without.
That's a pretty big bet that you're making. I mean, the conversation that I just had with you, and unfortunately history in the past. Now, you might be right. People might have suddenly switched in terms of their thinking and are now going like, holy cow, look what we have wrought upon our state and upon ourselves. This election and the one in 2014 is really going to tell the tale as to what's going to happen across the nation and in the state of Illinois.
Well, you know, you've got so many good examples now of why voters need to vote for the person who says, I'm not going to hand out the money anymore. Solyndra. I mean, the voters are looking at millions and billions of dollars of government money wasted on projects. They like to go around and saying, the Republicans, incumbents, will say, well, we shouldn't be picking winners and losers. And my response is, the problem is government has only been picking losers. That's all they pick is losers. Mm-hmm. If a company has to have a government bailout, they're probably going to go under anyway. And a good example of that is the Sears Chicago Mercantile Exchange bailout that was just voted for. Now, my opponent voted for that bill.
Now, explain so that those that don't know about that, they understand what you're meaning.
Okay, about last year, after midnight, before the new legislature took over.
In 2011.
In 2011, the legislature passed a very onerous, a very oppressive increase in the corporate income tax.
Right.
A lot of corporations and a lot of Republicans said that's going to kill jobs. It's going to drive jobs out of Illinois. Well, the Democrats passed it anyway. Well, sure enough, now we have the Chicago Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Sears, two Chicago-based corporations. They go to the legislature and they have high-power lobbyists, and the lobbyists go around intimidating legislators, and they say, you've got to vote to reduce our taxes. So that basically Emil's Lawnmower, who's competing with Sears, when Sears gets a bailout and they get their taxes lowered, now Emil's has to compete not only with the price of the Sears lawnmower, but the taxes. He has to pay higher taxes. Nobody down here got a tax break. No one got a bailout.
Down here, you mean
in the 108th District, yes. In Madison County, in St. Clair County, our local businesses didn't get any tax breaks, but these Chicago corporations got tax breaks. I would have voted against that. Dwight Kay, our state representative, voted against it. Senator Kyle McCarter voted against it. Bill Hayne, a liberal Democrat from Alton, voted for it, and my opponent, Paul Evans, also voted for it. So there's going to be a difference between the two of us. I say we have to cut spending, even on some projects that may have some merit. I say we can't vote for any more bailouts. I'm not going to fit in Springfield, and I'm glad I'm not going to fit in. I don't want to be an incumbent. I don't want to be a career legislator. In fact, we've got a big pension problem in Illinois, and I think another difference that's will emerge eventually, that we're taping this about 7 weeks before the election, but I'm not going to take a General Assembly pension, which is a pretty big pension. It could be as much as $80,000 or $90,000 a year. I don't think the state is in good enough shape to take legislators to Springfield who will accept these huge pensions. I'm telling everyone right now, and I'm telling the voters, that I'm not going to take this pension. We'll see what the other two people in the race have to say about it. But these cuts have to begin at home. I've talked about the cuts in the district that have to begin at home. Now I'm talking about personal cuts from the legislator. They have to begin at home. And if I can go in and say I'm not going to take a pension, then my votes for pension reform are much freer at that point.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's define a couple of things. The district that you're talking about running in, the 108th, is slightly different, but is basically the Ron Stevens district, isn't it? Yeah,
right.
Representative Ron Stevens had been a state rep for many, I forget how many years, 20-something years. And then he resigned, and the current rep, the one that you were referring to, Mr. Evans, he was appointed to that position, wasn't he? He wasn't elected to it.
Right. The district basically is Troy, Highland, St. Jacob. It goes up to Hamel. It goes over to Alhambra. It goes to O'Fallon, Lebanon. It goes down to Nashville, Illinois, and Carlisle, Illinois, Breeze, those areas in between there. But Ron Stevens is a good example of what happens when you go to Springfield. He was just a great guy. I knew Ron when he first started out. He was a war hero. He was a conservative. He was a person that you could really trust, you could really go to. And in the end, Ron went bankrupt. He couldn't pay his bills. He had to resign from the legislature and had to take this retirement with about an $85,000 a year pension. And it's unfortunate what happened to Ron. Ron is supporting Evans because I think they must be similar. They're in with each other. Ron, unfortunately, at the end, began to fit into Springfield, but he began to fit in too well. I know how to get along with Democrats. In the last 30 years, there have been 5 Democrat state's attorneys, and I worked for 4 of them. I know how to get along with them, and I did it for 18 or 20 years in some very high-pressure situations, and I only had to resign once over principle. I think you need a legislator to go to Springfield who can get along, who can talk to people, who can try to reach compromises to advance common goals. But it also has to be a legislator who will say, I will never compromise my principles. I can talk to you about certain things that we could do to advance the state government. When it comes down to your pork barrel spending, I'll trade for my pork barrel spending, I'm not going to do that. And I think that's the essential difference. I also think, Lee, that's what the voters are looking for. I'm very confident that the voters are going to send someone to Springfield from this district who says no more spending. We have to cut spending. We have to get spending under control. We have to get the pension problem under control. And once we do that, we can lower taxes.
Now, Illinois' credit rating has been diminished, hasn't it? There's no AAA here in the state of Illinois, is there?
Right. Illinois' credit rating is terrible. I mean, it was so bad that the Democrats had to do their wheeling and dealing and pass this tax increase at 2 a.m. in the morning before the new legislature took place. But here's the problem with that. Since we passed that increase and since we got billions of dollars more in revenue, what did the politicians do with that? They spent the money. Instead of reducing the pension problem, instead of reducing spending, now that we have this new income from the increase in the state income tax, the personal and corporate income tax, the first thing Pat Quinn said was, well, I'm really glad we passed this tax increase because now we can start borrowing again.
Well, where did the money go then? You said that they raised billions more with this increase. They didn't just apply it to debt. So where'd the money go?
They increased spending.
On what?
Well, I know that they spend, they pay 60 community organizers in Chicago $50,000 a year. And we all know that community organizers, when they move up the ladder, just create havoc with the economy. I mean, we have a community organizer in the White House, and we have $4 trillion deficits. That's one of the things they did. They continued to spend. There's a capital improvement bill. Instead of saying, look, we can't afford any more Lincoln libraries. We can't afford any more interstates right now. We can afford to keep our roads and bridges fixed. We can afford to keep the police on the street. We can't afford some of these other things like bike trails or water projects. They kept on spending, so that they created in the capital improvement bill basically a slush fund. So legislators can go to Hamel or to Highland or to St. Jacob or to Carlisle, and they can say, I brought home the bacon. Here's $90,000 for your particular little project. Vote for me.
All right. Well, they're going to say, you needed a sidewalk. You needed a new water main. You needed, to repair Main Street. You didn't have the money, and here your state legislature is coming forward with money.
Well, and that's the project. The things you named, most of those probably should be funded. But there are other things, new improvements that we just can't afford right now. We can't afford, we need to fix the interchange in Lebanon. We need to fix that bypass. That's a big bottleneck. That's something that's necessary. Building a 4-lane from Vincennes all the way to Lebanon, even though we've purchased the ground, is something that's nice. It's something that when we get our fiscal house in order, we'll do. Okay. We can't afford it right now.
Now, what to do with the pension? I mean, do you have a proposal? I heard what you said. You're not taking it. Okay, that's one way to deal with the pension system. What else do you propose to do in order, because that's one of the largest outlays of the state government, isn't it? The pension payments on a monthly basis.
Right. Unfunded pension liability in Illinois, once you talk about the pensions that you owe, the pensions that you're going to owe, the return on your investments, which will not be 8%, that unfunded pension liability can be in excess of $100 million ultimately to the public.
100 million or billion?
$100 million. 100.
Yeah, these numbers just, they get so large, but what is it that you think can be done in order to close that gap so that when somebody is expecting a pension, that the check is actually going to show up?
Yeah, the numbers really are truly mind-boggling. What you have to understand about the pension problem is, I think we can cap the pensions. One of the real problems are the pension abuses. There are people who get $150,000, $170,000 in pensions. I think there should be a cap on state government pensions. The cap should be around $75,000, and it should be based on your years that you've served actually in a pension fund. It shouldn't be, I worked there for 4 days and I now have a $150,000 pension. It should more be, I worked there for 20 years so I can hit the cap. Now, with that in mind, you have to really be careful what you're doing, for example, with teachers' pensions. Right now, they're taking money out of the teachers' pension funds, which they shouldn't be doing. That should be segregated for teachers because they pay into it. But in addition, teachers will not get Social Security. So I think teachers should have a higher cap than other people in the Illinois pension plans because of the Social Security input. I also think for new hires like me and someone in the legislature that's going to be newly into the legislature, new hires probably shouldn't even get a pension. But I want to emphasize that if you have a pension now, if you've earned your pension now, that was part of the deal. You're entitled to keep that pension. It's just that it should be reasonable. It's not going to do anyone any good if all the pension funds go broke, and then it doesn't matter if you're entitled to a pension or not, the state can't pay it.
That was my point, is that somebody is, as you just said, is vested, and then one day, 5, 6 years from now, no check shows up because there's no money in the bank to write that check.
Yeah, they have to do that, and even if you invest the pension money at 8%, which is impossible, as we said before, it is billions of dollars, maybe over $100 billion that we're eventually going to be in debt. We cannot afford to do that. We have to do something with the pension funds. You can't just go to Springfield and be one of the persons that caused the problem. I mean, that's why it's a campaign of ideas rather than a campaign of endorsements. basically everyone who's been in Springfield and who is in Springfield right now is part of the problem. We have to send people there who are independent, who aren't professional politicians, who don't want to make this their life's work, who just want to go and try to reform Springfield.
We're down to about, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 minutes left. Time goes by. It's just incredibly fast here. You wanted to, you've got 2 books that are laying out here, and you wanted to, I know you wanted to mention those as well. You're, in addition to that other list of things that I told people about at the beginning, you're also an author of several books. These are a couple of them here?
Well, they are, but you know, they pale in insignificance with what we were talking about. I'm glad that we talked a lot about the pension plans, about the pork barrel spending, about the need for reform in Springfield. These were another career that I had as an author. I've had other careers. I really don't have a career ahead of me. What I've got is further public service. From 1975 to 2005, I was a part-time patent lawyer, but I was also a part-time prosecutor. It was just a time, 20 years of public service.
You worked for Bill Hayne, who's now a state senator.
I worked for Bill Hayne and for Bill Mudge and for Nick Byron when they were state's attorneys, and of course when I was state's attorney myself. So I've worked for a lot of people. Like I said, I only had to resign once, so it wasn't really too bad. But sometimes you have to do that over principle. That's what I want to do in Springfield. It's really a matter of principle. That's why I'm running. I mean, I've got other things I could do. I'm very passionate about this. I want to fix this. I want to, for instance, pass concealed carry. I've got a Virginia non-resident concealed carry permit, which means I can carry in just about every state except Illinois. And I don't understand why I'm a resident of Illinois and I've got to get a Virginia concealed carry permit. So I want to do that. There are some other things, I think, with rolling back all the problems civil unions have caused. I'd like to restore the death penalty. But really, the big problem in Illinois is spending. And spending leads to taxes. And that's what has to be reformed.
Well, I agree with you that spending is a real issue in most places in the United States now, especially at the federal level. You know, spending's completely out of control. I don't think that people understand. I was going to ask you, and that's another discussion for another day, but when a state or a federal government gets its rating lowered, and we're down to like 30 seconds here, you know, what does that do in terms of interest payments? The answer, as you and I both know, is that you have to pay more interest. It just costs more to borrow.
Right, and it's just time to change Springfield. If you like what's going on in Springfield, if you like what's going on with their bond rating, if you like what's going on with the taxes and the spending, then I'm not your guy. But if you want to change things, if you want to reform things, if you want to get Illinois back on a sound fiscal policy, then you're going to need to vote for Don Weber on March 20th.
Thank you very much for coming and being with us. Folks, I've been speaking with Don Weber. He has a long list of credentials, and I'm sure that you, if you do a web search, you'll be able to find him and learn more about his campaign. We really enjoyed having him and having him tell us about his thinking. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll see you next week. Thank you.